Welcome to Game of Books with Cathi in South Dakota.
That's me, and Christy in South Florida.
That's me. We're two newbie writers sharing our take on wine, food, and mystery books.
And the authors who write them. Join us for the fun. Hey everybody, happy holidays! It's a perfect time for some wine. Well, when isn't it? But perfect time right now for wine, food, and friendly discussion.
Yes, exactly. And here's a novel idea. Why don't we discuss Stephen King's book about kids confronting evil to get us in the holiday spirit? What do you think?
Leave it to you to take us down the dark path. Well, we are today doing The Institute by Stephen King, which is very sinister. But it's also great fiction. I mean, it's so great. So maybe it will make us appreciate evil a little bit less.
Yeah.
I don't know what to say.
Yeah.
It's pretty dark.
Yeah. Well, real life is not quite, hopefully. I don't know. There could be some secret institute we don't know about that the government has going. So maybe we just better drink some wine and lift our spirits.
That's a good way to start. Yeah, there you go. Okay, so I have just the perfect choice for that. Just what we need today.
Okay.
Are you ready?
I'm ready.
We are having Domaine Ste Michelle Sparkling Brut. It's a champagne from the Washington Columbia Valley.
Yes.
And before we have a little sip, I'm going to tell you the tasting notes, which are really interesting. And I'm almost certain we have not had tasting notes like this thus far.
Look, I popped the champagne before we even started, so I'm going to take a sip while you're telling the tasting notes.
Okay, you take a sip. Yeah, all right, go for it. Okay. So, delicate aromas of green apple. Bright citrus notes with a persistent bubble and balanced acidity. Domaine Ste Michelle Brut is the perfect accompaniment for a wide array of foods.
Okay.
So I was reading that and I thought, I don't recall ever having green apple in any of our tasting notes before.
You're right. We might not have. Although it's really hard to tell because how many episodes have we done? I'm like,
I don't know, 379. No, I don't know. A lot.
Maybe I can remember pear, but I don't remember apple. You're right. I don't
either.
It
so
is,
what do you
though.
think?
I can see. Yeah. It's a little bit like bubbly apple juice.
It's as many wines are. It's fresh though, don't you think? I mean, it's not.
Yes, I do. I like it because sometimes champagne can have sort of a aftertaste kind of that I don't like or something, or maybe it's too dry, or this just seems very smooth for a champagne, you know? Actually, it's a sparkling wine, right? It's not really a champagne. Because it doesn't come from Champagne.
You're correct, Christy, Miss Francophile. It is.
I learned that in
French
in high school.
It is technically a sparkling wine, and the pairing suggestions are kind of great because it's all over the place. They suggest a perfect brunch companion, or that you can, as you noted, serve it with a salty appetizer like popcorn or chips, which is, I know, your favorite treat.
I know. I've been trying not to buy them, so maybe I'll just have to look up,
chip.
I'll have some nuts today.
There you go. But I also had found that it pairs very well with my inspiration for our book club to celebrate the Institute, which is peach cobbler. So if I was having a book club in real life, yes, I would be serving peach cobbler this evening and pair it with this sparkling wine. What do you think? Do you remember why?
No, I can't. I'm like sitting here, I'm going, peach cobbler. I mean, I remember like junk food from the,
Okay, so I will tell you that at the beginning of the Institute, before things go too off the rails, we have a gentleman who is having dinner in this very small town. He's new to this small town,
right.
And he finds kind of the only eating establishment, which is Bev's Diner.
Oh.
Remember Bev's
Yes.
Eatery? Sorry,
Yes.
Bev's Eatery.
Yeah.
And
I do remember that.
that's where he, right, and that's where he ends up eating most of his meals. And frankly, most of the meals did not inspire me to serve them to anybody else because they included things like liver and onions,
right.
or chicken fried steak. And I thought, well, I'm not serving that to a book
Yeah,
club.
right.
Hey friends, come have some chicken fried steak, liver and onions.
I would be happy with
That
that, but I don't think everybody would.
No, that did not appeal to me. But he also enjoyed some peach cobbler as dessert at Bev's Eatery after he ate all the heavy food. And I thought that would be a really fun with some really yummy ice cream.
Yeah.
Which I would tell you, the ice cream would come from
From
our
your back
university in
porch?
town here. Yeah, well, in South Dakota, that's where we could store it right now. But our university in town, SDSU, has a really outstanding creamery.
Oh, cool.
And they have this great ice cream store. So when you come to Brookings sometime to visit, I'll take you up there. And by
Sounds
the way,
good.
that is where cookies and cream ice cream was invented here.
No way.
Yes way. Yes.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So anyway, I would
Ooh.
serve peach cobbler with SDSU vanilla ice cream and this lovely Domaine Ste Michelle Brut.
Perfect. And then a few nuts on
I
the
know.
side for the salty people.
And I will put nuts out for you for the salty, yes.
Oh, yum. Well, that's a really good idea.
Yeah.
I was wondering what you were going to come up with from this book. I mean, there is food in there, but, it's just so different. And,
Yeah.
none of our, sit down wine dinners that we sometimes have in
No.
our mysteries and thrillers. All right, so now that we've discussed the food, we don't really have peach cobbler here, but we do have our wonderful champagne. Let's talk about the book itself. What do you say?
And I really do think a little bit of champagne or sparkling wine is good to have for this conversation. It takes the edge off a little bit of the heaviness of this topic.
I mean, with Stephen King, the story is just always so good. I mean,
Ugh.
I don't like to go to horror movies. I don't like that kind of thing, in general, but I love his books because even if they end up scaring me, which some do, that they just have good stories. They have good characters. You just, you want to find out what's going to happen and usually there's something good in the end. Don't you think? Most of his, I don't know, Carrie was a little...
Not all of them, but I do think he has a very...
At least usually somebody you like still alive or something. I don't know, maybe.
Yeah, I think that's interesting because he can really, he takes you to dark places very often, obviously, but he somehow can give a little light at the end of it. And I would imagine that's very peculiar to him or particular to him, excuse me. And
Right.
peculiar, but that is true.
Yeah. So anyway, in this book, I'll just give a brief kind of overview. It's a long book, so I can't really go into too much.
Don't you think you should introduce the author? People might not know who he is.
Oh, you know what? That's so
I'm
funny that you
joking.
said that because I was thinking that when I was doing up my notes and I'm like, oh, I forgot to write anything about Stephen King down. And so I didn't
You don't
even
need to.
research it, but I'm like, okay, I just recently saw this documentary. I know so much about him. And and even we are doing 2 of his books today because when we get later in the writer's perspective that we're going to talk about another one of his books on writing. So,
yes.
he's just, everybody knows who he is. And if you don't look him up, just Google Stephen King and, you'll get a million things because he's written so many great books and, is probably one of the most successful, if not the most successful authors, I would say.
He's an institution unto himself. And
Yeah.
I think even if you aren't a reader,
Mm-hmm.
he's one of those few authors and writers that is universally known, right?
Yes.
And
yes.
he's like the celebrity with one name, right?
Yeah.
Everyone knows Stephen King.
Yep.
For good reason.
Yes. And so this book, The Institute, it's, oftentimes he'll have books that he talks about kids. And what was interesting about this book is, it kind of goes into kids that have special gifts like telepathy and what's the other one? Telekinesis?
Telekinesis? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, where you can move
Right.
things, and stuff, which is interesting as on its own. Like, I mean, do you really believe that people can do stuff like that? I don't know. I'm not sure.
I do. I guess I'm open to it. I think
Right.
I think there's so much more capacity to our brains than we could ever and other parts of our beings that we could ever imagine.
Right.
So
Right.
I'm gonna say
so
I'm
I'm
open
open
to
to
anything.
it. Yeah. But,
Yeah.
but anyway, so this, so this goes into it, and it's just, it is really, the government is doing some bad stuff, trying to weaponize these kids. And so it just goes into like, how they go through this. Now, the interesting thing that there was a couple things. First of all, the character you talked about who ate the peach cobbler, whatever his name
Yeah.
is, Tim, I think. He he gets a job as a night knocker.
Yeah.
And when I read that, I was like, what the heck's a night knocker, right? And I'm thinking you probably were thinking the same thing, and I was. And I just kept reading until I kind of figured it out. And then in like chapter 10, he just kind of pretty much spells it out exactly what it is, which basically is what we would think of as sort of a night watchman.
Mm-hmm.
But I was like, where did he come up with this? And, I'm pretty sure he might've just made it up, but when I was preparing for this, I Googled it, and the first thing that popped up, and really the only thing that kind of talked about it, was a Reddit thread. And do you know Reddit, the website Reddit?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, it was hysterical because somebody said, oh my gosh, what is a night knocker? I'm just started reading this book, and there were like 300 or more comments, and it was all people that were reading the book and Googled night knocker, and the first thing that came up was this thread, and the only thing really, because they couldn't find it on not on Google or Bing, And so a lot of, theories were shot around, but one of them that I thought was so interesting was the way that Stephen King describes the position is the same job that Clarice Starling's father had in Silence of the Lambs. Because I don't know if you remember, but she talked about her father when her father got killed or whatever, and she talked about him as being a policeman, but then Lecter confronted her, and turns out he wasn't a sheriff's deputy, he was a night watchman, and he punched an ancient time clock, and he wasn't allowed to carry a weapon, just like this character. So I don't know, maybe it was a little bit of a nod to.
Yeah, I thought that was a really obscure reference. I mean, I thought that was really interesting, though, because a lot of readers who read Stephen King also have read The Silence of the Lambs.
Right, and Stephen King has read Silence of the Lambs, too. In fact, he's...
Yeah.
So I don't know, but I just thought... And also the other thing that people noticed, and I'm wondering, could you tell what time, or did they have anything in there that said what like year this was?
Like what era? No. And initially when he got to this when the night knocker got to this small town, it felt like it could have been a throwback to any time, but I have to say where he's just walking to the, diner, and then he goes to the little motel. But I thought that could happen in any small town where sometimes time doesn't, doesn't really, it can stand still sometimes. So I thought that,
Right.
yeah, I didn't know. I really didn't know.
Right. A lot of people had a theory that maybe this was something he had written farther back and had taken out and reworked, because they were saying, oh, it's supposed to be in the present, but it's not. And I mean, there's things that are not like the present. And so then I was like, well, how do they think it's supposed to be the present? I was like looking everywhere. And the one odd thing, and which of course none of this detracts from the book, but it's just fun to talk about, was he, in one thing, somebody called an Uber.
Oh.
And they called the Uber and they paid for the Uber like a taxi, which you don't really do with Ubers. But then some people were like, well, in small towns, we don't even have Uber, so maybe they didn't know, blah, blah, blah. And plus, Uber wasn't a long time ago, but one of the references that the kid made to like a movie, a director, was like M. Night Shyamalan.
Yeah.
And kind of made me think that they were referring to Signs. It was Sixth Sense.
Oh, sure.
But that was made in 1999. So if the kid was referring to it, then you would think it was closer to around the turn of the century. I don't know. That's what
Interesting.
Yeah, I know. It was interesting because
Those
obviously it doesn't really
readers.
matter. I know. I know.
No. Well, and that's what's so great about Stephen King is I assume everything he does is very intentional, probably so we have this conversation. And then it harkens to the main plot of what the government is doing. And could that have happened in the past? Yep. Could it be happening right now? Ooh, let's hope not. Right? So, yeah.
It's a little scary though. Yeah.
It is indeed. Hence Stephen King. Writer's perspective. Okay, since we're talking about Stephen King, we thought we would take something from his wonderful book about writing called On Writing.
Right. And I hadn't read it before, but as a writer, I found it so helpful and just really inspiring.
Oh, I agree. I've read it several times, and I've listened to it on Audible as well, because I just think every time I go back to it, there's something that I can pick up, and
well, I'm really glad you recommended it. Like I said, I hadn't read it, and I just I don't know how I haven't been writing for that long, so I guess, I don't know everything, but I, hadn't heard of it.
Me.
So I know. I mean, you think I've got every
out.
book on writing on my shelf by now, but no, I did not. So then when we decided to use something from this book as our writer's perspective topic, then I realized it's kind of difficult because he gives a lot of really good information. And for a small book, it's packed, I think.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And anyways, but one thing that really kind of struck me and kind of gave me a different perspective, like a good perspective on writing and rewriting and that kind of thing, was a quote that he had in there from his editor when he was in high school and he worked for the town newspaper. Stephen King was in high school, and his editor was named John Gould, and Stephen King was actually a sports writer for the local newspaper. But anyway, after he did his first story, the guy, marked it all up and did a little mini rewrite. And so then he said, when you write a story, you're telling yourself the story. But when you rewrite, your main job is taking out all the things that are not in the story. And if you really think about rewriting, I haven't always thought that way. I mean, yes, I knew, okay, I got to take out this redundancies, these adverbs, but that does help you pare it down. I remember when a agent told me you need to tighten it up. That's exactly what she was saying, basically. But this gives me a better way of looking at it. Like, hey, yeah, I'm telling myself this story, but just because I happen to picture some weird extraneous thing going on doesn't mean that that's part of the story, and it probably doesn't have to be in there.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, I think it's really good advice because, like you say, just getting the first draft down, getting the story down is a huge accomplishment in itself, right? But then it's the rewrite is, man, where it's at. And that's where you tighten it up for your reader, leaving out the stuff that isn't helpful or, you don't want in there for them to confuse them or make it, mess up the pace like we've talked about in the past. That's what I was thinking about when he mentioned this is where you clean up the pace, right? Because it's so easy. Like when you and I are chatting here and we're telling a story, we will always bring up things we go on about things, right?
Maybe.
But if you were to write down it as a story, it wouldn't be necessary to be in there. Like that little anecdote I just gave you. Not
yes,
necessary
it was.
At all.
It was totally necessary. Yeah. And in this book, in this version, he has added things. He put in a passage that he had written, just purely rough passage. And then he showed his first rewrite.
What'd you think of that?
And I thought that was really, really cool.
I did too.
And then he gave some notes on it, so that you understood why he did some things, because some were obvious, but some, like, he changed the name of the character to, a shorter name, because he was like, I'm going to be reading this audiobook and I don't want to read Humpernickel,
was great, yeah.
I know. And I was like, so there's all kinds of reasons why we, and the more you do it, the more you know. Like the first time he wrote a book, he wasn't thinking of the audiobook,
No. Well, and we've heard that before from other writers at conferences about how now that's kind of a new part of their editing process, is thinking about how it's going to sound on the audiobook. I just think that's so interesting.
I know. Also, I thought this was just a side note that is, can purely be cut because it's really not part of the story. But this is episode 13.
Oh,
right?
Yes.
Of our second season. And the little story that he used in there was about the 13th floor.
Oh.
And it was called 1408. That was the room number. And if you add those numbers together, it equals 13.
Oh, you are going down the Stephen King path today. That's awesome. I love it.
So that's why we just happen to be doing Stephen King right in the middle of the holidays. But
what we should have done is recorded this last
episode.
Christy, we should have recorded this last Friday on Friday the 13th.
You're so right. Oh,
I know.
My gosh.
I will say one of my I'm gonna take us in a different direction. I just have to throw this in. One of my favorite parts of this book is the circumstances under which it was written, where he talks about the story about his accident, that terrible accident.
Oh my gosh.
And how he finally got back into writing. Isn't that so interesting?
Yeah, and when he told that story, I mean, that, because it was first person, and when have you ever heard that like that so clear? That was just, I mean, I was...
It is worth reading this book just to read his perception
description of his accent.
Yeah,
exactly. From his perspective, because it's like, you don't know, you're just... It's shocking from the outside, but you're wondering from the inside. Oh, wow. So it was really... That was riveting. That's true. Okay, Cathi. Now it's time for our personal updates.
You sound tired when you say that. That was not the most uplifting. It should be, hey, personal updates, let's go. By the way, again, I will remind you, this is your idea, this whole keep each other accountable thing.
I know. Well, I can tell you right now that bad on my work in progress, but good on updating a short story that I had that I'm going to try to put into it for an anthology.
Yay.
So I uploaded that for fellow writers to critique for me in this little critique group. So we'll see how that goes. So
Wonderful.
that's something, right? And and then we've got the holidays, but we're trying to do all these podcasts at the same time too. So that's taken up a lot of our time too. Don't you think?
There are always things. Yes, for sure.
Yes. I mean, my Christmas shopping has not really even started, and I feel like, oh my gosh, it's a few days away.
Well, Yeah, you might want to get on that. I am doing, not really intentionally, but I have been doing what Stephen King recommends. So I feel like I'm really on track. But he recommends when you finish a draft or a revision, put it aside for a while so you can look at it with fresh eyes. And that's what I've been doing.
Okay.
But I did actually. I started this morning again, and I
did see that, but I was thinking maybe that he was talking about the first time you write.
Whatever, blah 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 details. But I will say this morning, I had been away from it enough time that I did truly have a fresh approach.
Oh, good.
And that felt really nice. So.
Oh, good. So you worked on it some today, right?
I did this morning bright and early.
Because I'm making us accountable, and you knew you were going to have to say something.
That might have been. It was before 5 a.m., which is my favorite time to write. So,
good.
I will say one of the most exciting things lately is that we have been corresponding with J.T. Ellison, and she is going to appear on our Corks and Conversation in the new year.
Yes. And her book comes out on the 28th, I think, her new book.
Good Girls Lie. And she is going to appear on a Corks and Conversation with us in January. Yay! So we're really excited about that.
Yeah, and we're lining up some good ones for the spring. We're not going to tell you all of them now.
No, but
we'll
everyone
save that for maybe our New Year's episode or something.
Yeah, order her book, and we will let you know when we're going to talk about it.
Yeah, that's that. Put it on. I'm sure you can pre-order. It's the 28th, so you can get it right after Christmas and before New Year's, so you can have something to do in that downtime when you are in the food coma or whatever.
Authors love it when you pre-order, so that would be great.
Yes. Yep. Great. So much to look forward to, and Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas. Thanks to our mysterious foodies out there for listening and sharing. Check out our website, gameofbookspodcast.com, where you can find links to all we talk about. And if you subscribe to our weekly newsletter, you can get those links sent directly to you, along with any exciting updates. We are also on Facebook and Twitter under @GOBWriters.
And if you enjoyed this episode as much as we did, we would love to hear from you. And please subscribe to Game of Books wherever you listen to podcasts so you don't miss any of our book club ideas and Corks and Conversations with award-winning and best-selling authors.
That's all for today's episode of Game of Books Podcast, where we share food, wine, and mystery every Friday morning, just in time for the weekend.
This is Christy.
And Cathi.
Saying thanks for listening.
Bye, everybody.